Hello, this is Angelia, and you are listening to or watching the podcast Why You Do What You Do, and it's being filmed on this little tablet today because the um, laptop has decided to be dead and stupid. I don't know what that's about, but I'm back, and out with COVID, so that was not fun. Excuse me. And last time we left off, we were talking about Kohlberg's levels and stages, and we were talking about the post conventional morality or morality of autonomous moral principle, and how some people never quite make it to that stage. And we're going to talk more about Kohlberg. We'll take up on his stuff. Um, Kohlberg later added a transitional level between levels 2 and 3 when people no longer feel bound by society's moral standards, but have not yet reasoned out their own principles of justice. And see, I keep trying to adjust this here because it's not quite right. Because, yeah, I don't have a stand for this. It's leaning on the laptop. So crazy. But yeah, there are people who are have post conventional thinking, but haven't quite figured out what they stand for. Um, so that was just something that he added in, and if you keep studying, keep learning, keep self exploring, you'll eventually figure out who you are and what you stand for. Instead, they base their moral decisions on personal feelings. And as most of us know, you can't do that. Because the way you feel about something is not the way other people feel about something. Everybody's different. And so if you know you're right, then you're not, because other people know they're right too. It's like Gandhi said, if everyone's right, then nobody can be. In Kohlberg's theory, it is the reasoning underlying a person's response to a moral dilemma, not the answer itself, that indicates the stage of moral development. So it's how you react to a thing, not, you know, the thing and the process itself. Um, like there are people who, tell you a lot about themselves without telling you, because the way they act tells you everything you need to know. Two people who give opposite answers may be at the same stage if their reasoning is based on similar factors. And that's why we have political parties and differences of opinion, because one person's like knows things are this way and the other person knows things are that way, but they both don't really. That's their opinion based on their experience of what they've learned so far. Um, and, you never are done learning. We learn every day of our life if we let ourselves. Now, there are ignorant people who do not want to learn anything new. They're fine where they're at. So you know, if if you find where you're at, then that's where you're gonna stay. So Kohlberg's early stages correspond roughly to Piaget's stages of moral development in childhood, but his advanced stages go into adulthood. So where Piaget stopped, Kohlberg keeps on going into adulthood and what's going on with our grown-ups. Some adolescents and even some adults remain at Kohlberg's level 1. Like I said, there are people who they believe everything the authority figures say, and that's what they do. And they have very pre-conventional ways of thinking, like young children. Like young children, they seek to avoid punishment or satisfy their own needs, because they're keeping with the status quo. They're doing what they're being told to do. Most adolescents and most adults seem to be at level 2, where we're like, hey, just because they say this right doesn't mean it's right, because I don't think it's right because of, this is what I learned and this is what I feel. And so most of us are, you know, kind of at the conventional and going into post conventional ways. They conform to social conventions, support the status quo, and do the right thing to please others or to obey the law. And there are whole societies based on this, you know. But again, not everything is right and everybody can be right. So when you're basing a society on one group's ideas of what's right, then other groups will suffer because they don't fit into the norm. Very few people reach level 3 when they can choose between two socially accepted standards. And it does take a mature person to stand back and say, well, I can see the value in that. However, or even in my own political belief systems, I don't believe with everything my political party says, especially when we're talking about, sex changes in children. A child is not a sexual being yet. So that child cannot know for sure until it is a mature sexual being what sex it is. So you can't be taking young children and saying, we're going to transition this child at, 12, 16, 18 even, I think, um, because you know they're not a sexual being yet. And even now, as adults, we have heard of adults who transition and said, "Oh God, I'm miserable. I was wrong," and transition back. So my political party does things that are wrong, and just abortions for no reason. Not down with that. Everyone knows what it takes to make a baby. At least you should. If you don't, you need to go talk to somebody. If you do what it takes, then you're responsible for that life. Now, I believe if that was forced upon you, or such as rape and incest, then I believe those are cases where that child did not come from God. That child was not a gift from God. That child was a gift from the devil and the man who decided to rape. Because the devil has free will, and so did that man. And if that was put against you and that was not your choice, I don't feel like you should have to give birth to that child. That's just my opinion. And I've had people come against me. How can you say you're a Christian? Blah blah blah. That's just my opinion because I know enough to know the devil does have free will and he will exercise it any way he can. In fact, at one point, Kohlberg questioned the validity of stage 6, since so few people seem to attain it. Um, and that's the facts, and these things come with learning. And so if you stifle yourself and you don't learn, about yourself and learn more about what's been found by other people through the years, there are a lot of people who don't believe in science, don't want to know about science, blah, blah, blah. But when you study science, you find out all the things that scientists have discovered and found out. And by keeping yourself from doing that, I feel like you're just choosing to be ignorant of, the advances of mankind. Yeah, you're happy with your status quo. You're in your little conventional morality. Later, however, he proposed a seventh cosmic stage in which people consider the effect of their actions not only on other people, but on the universe as a whole. And there are people who are that enlightened. They say Buddha was one of these people. So, there might be people who out there who are taking these things into consideration. I don't think I'm quite at that point, and I don't know, how much I'll have to study to be at that point, but at least I'm post conventional. The American boys, whom Kohlberg and his colleagues followed through adulthood, progressed through Kohlberg stages in sequence, and none skipped a stage. Their levels of moral judgment correlated positively with increasing age, education, IQ, and socioeconomic status. So, the higher you go in all of these things, the more you'll know, the more you'll learn, and the more altruistic and thoughtful you will become. Even children as young as 6 weighed the perceived justice of a law, its social purpose, and its potential for infringement on individual freedoms, excuse me, and rights in evaluating whether the law was good or bad, and whether or not it should be obeyed. So even kids as young as 6 can see that if something's unfair to some group, then it's probably not a good law. We're having problems with that here in the USA, aren't we? Furthermore, research has generally noted the lack of a clear relationship between moral reasoning and moral behavior. So even though sometimes people know something's wrong, they don't choose to follow their conscience. They do what is best for their wallets. We have a whole system where that's what it's all about, even though they might call themselves good people, and they supposedly know how to be good people, yet they're doing the wrong thing. They're lining their pockets all the time. So people at post conventional levels of reasoning do not necessarily act more morally than those at lower levels. Um, because, like I said, we have free will. So you might know how to be a good person and still choose not to be one. We unfortunately have free will. Perhaps one problem is the remoteness from young people's experience of such dilemmas as the Heinz situation. On the other hand, just juvenile delinquents, particularly boys, consistently show developmental delays in Kohlbergian tests of moral reasoning. So your more delinquent types, um, just honestly, they're a little slow on picking up morality. There are some people in our country now who um, have this kind of attitude, and it's like I don't have to be moral, I do what I want. And it's like, well, no, no, and then other people will follow them, and you're like, no, are you insane? You're all crazy. What the is this about? Critics claim that a cognitive approach to moral development gives insufficient attention to the importance of emotion. And we have emotions, all of us have emotions, but the truth of a human mind is that we can think about these emotions and we can decide whether we're going to act on these emotions or not. We're not lesser animals, we have a choice. Um, so we're supposed to be able to choose to be good people you know. Yeah, okay. I'm checking something here. Because this battery isn't as good as the one on the laptop. I'm not sure I'm gonna get my full half hour in today, but we'll get as far as we can. Moral activity, they say, is motivated not only by abstract considerations of justice, but by such emotions as empathy, guilt, and distress, and the internalization of pro social norms. So, um, in order to be a moral person, you need to be able to feel these things. You need to have empathy. You need to be able to put yourself in the other person's shoes and feel how that might feel. Um, you need to be able to have guilt for your actions if they're the wrong thing. There's some people who don't have that. They're definitely sociopaths. Um, and distress, you know, and you need to, be able to internalize pro social norms. So, if you're a narcissistic sociopath and stepping all over everybody else, it's all about you and what you get yours, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, then you're never going to develop proper moral reasoning. Some theories today seek to synthesize Kohlberg's cognitive developmental approach with the role of emotion and the insights of socialization theory. Because the theory is if you are socialized properly, you're going to be able to, have empathy and, internalize what other people are going through. Kohlberg himself did recognize that non cognitive factors such as emotional development and life experience affect moral judgments. So, the more emotionally developed you are, the more life experiences you have, the more moral you tend to be. One reason the ages attached to Kohlberg's levels are so variable is that people who have achieved a high level of cognitive development do not always reach a comparably high level of moral development. Because you can be really smart, but unless you were socialized in a proper way, you may not develop moral reasoning and development to the point where you probably should. A certain level of cognitive development is necessary, but not sufficient for a comparable level of moral development. So, when you're raising your kids, you need to not only be concerned about their IQ, You also need to be concerned about their EQ. You know, that's something I taught my kids is how to be a good person, how to think about other people, put yourself in their shoes. Because you do need to have an EQ if you want to get along with other people and navigate the world and also be able to take care of yourself. Thus, other processes besides cognitive must be at work. And of course, they are. It has to do with your emotions as well. And whether you were taught, you know, excuse me, on how to empathize with other people. Family influences. Neither PJ nor Kohlberg considered parents important to children's moral development. So they kind of was looking at them in a vacuum, and you can't really do that because the parents are the number one consideration to a child's moral development. You learn what you live. More recent research, however, emphasizes parents' contribution in both the cognitive and the emotional realms because you are the first people that that child is learning from. So if you're not teaching them, uh, you know, any emotionality, only intellectualism, then they're not going to have that moral reasoning when they get older. In one study, parents of 63 students in grades 1, 4, 7, and 10 were asked to talk with their children about hypothetical and real dilemmas. Kind of like I think his name's John Quinones, maybe. What would you do on that show? Where they propose there's this situation and they want to see what other people are going to do. And, they're praised if they are doing the right thing. And some people, don't, and that's a shame. The children and adolescents who, during the next 2 years, showed the greatest progress through Kohlberg stages were those whose parents had used humor and praise. So, you can joke with your kid and you can tell, "Hey, you did good. I saw how you gave that kid a piece of your candy bar when his dropped on the ground. That was really nice of you to share with him like that." And you can praise them. And you listen to them, of course, and ask their opinions. Because that's the way to get them to think. You ask their opinion. What did you think about when you saw that or heard that? How did that make you feel? And it's okay if you sound like a psychologist to your child. You can ask those who, what, why, where, and when questions to them to get them to think for themselves. These parents had asked clarifying questions, rewarded answers, reworded, my little tongue here, and checked to be sure the children understood the issues. So that's something too that you can do with the kid, is to get them to think about it, ask them questions. Because so many people don't parent their kids. They raise the child from babyhood to adulthood, and that's it. That's their investment. Is they kept the kid fed and clothed and a roof over their head. That's all they cared about. They didn't care in making the child a good person. Personally, I want my children to go out into the world and be as good a person as they can possibly be. So that's important to me. They reason with their children at a slightly higher level than the children we're currently at. And we're going to have to pause here.